Germany in the wintertime is life under persistent heavy clouds and drizzle. By mid-February, we had had enough. To bolster our spirits until the start of spring, we decided to take a trip. The unusual thing about it was that only one of us would know where we were going, and it wasn't me.
As Tony here was going about his normal business, I was busy planning out our late winter getaway to coincide with our birthdays. I took advantage of the cheap continental flights within Europe and found €29 tickets to Mailand. Don't know where that is? Neither did Tony.
Part of the game was that Allison was going to see how far she could get me until I figured out a destination. I have to say, I was nearly on the plane before I heard Italy over the loudspeaker, but still I thought, Mailand? Where's Mailand?
Turns out, when the Germans say Mailand, they are talking about Milan, but we were only landing in Milan. Our real destination was Genoa. This is a city of about 600,000 on what's called the Italian Riviera. It's the coastline east of the French Riviera in a region called Liguria. Genoa bills itself as having the largest medieval quarter in all of Europe, but somehow it's never been on the tourist map. The birthplace of Christopher Columbus was never enough of a draw, but what drew me to Genoa was the good Ligurian food, twisty alleyways, and the ample hiking opportunities nearby.
We arrived in a city built on an amphitheater of hills that slope down into the beautiful turquoise Mediterranean. It's a three-dimensional city with buildings under tunnels and roads on top of buildings. I started to wonder if Genoans had different brains than the rest of us to keep track of the many layers.
James Joyce once said Genoa is the most winding, incoherent of cities, the most entangled topographical ravel in the world. The city made for great exploration. Christopher Columbus would have approved. We climbed high and low, discovering the city's many nooks and crannies. Little footpaths took us past bright pastel houses to the tops of hills, where we saw stretching before us the jumbled cityscape before a line of blue sea, and to the west a ring of snow-capped peaks of the northern Apennines.
Deep in the city's labyrinth, we got lost among the squirrely streets that opened into intimate courtyards, only big enough to contain a small chapel or cafe or wine bar. As we learned, the city was constructed this way by prominent families who competed for power and space by expanding their domains willy-nilly, inch by inch. The buildings are so close they seem to be falling towards each other. In that time, most of the footpaths and courtyards were closed to the public, used only by the noble families and their hangers-on.
Adding to the mystique is the grittiness of the old town. The whole place has the feeling of crumbling decadence. Go to Venice, I'm told, and you feel like you're in Disney World. But Genoa is the real deal. The buildings were last painted decades ago, and there are still scantily clad women on footpaths in the old town waiting for customers.
Ligurian food is all about making the most of what little there is in an area of craggy, windswept cliffs perched on the sea. Just a few simple ingredients are maximized to great effect. Basil, garlic, and olive oil are pounded into the most famous Genovese sauce, pesto. From flour, salt, and olive oil coming from the olive groves overlooking the city, you get focaccia. But while some Ligurian food has made it to the international scene, it's never, of course, the same as being right here. For example, focaccia in America tends to be thick and doughy. In Liguria, it's more like an oily cracker, sometimes with toppings, but good enough plain that you could really taste its simple ingredients. And then, as we found out, there are dishes that have never really left Liguria, like a squiggly pasta called trophy, made of chestnut flour that's really tasty when combined with two other Ligurian staples, artichokes and shrimp, and a chickpea flour crepe called farinata, which has a really great nutty flavor.
It was hard to keep room for the many other Ligurian delights when we couldn't get past the focaccia stands, which are on nearly every street corner. Between that and popping into a bar for a consistently high-standard cappuccino, and we were satiated and caffeinated for our long walks into the hills. Another great thing about the Italian Riviera is that it's got great public transportation. No need to bother with a rental car. Trains and ferries travel along the coast, stopping at nearly every town. That makes it possible to hike as long as you desire, and then have options to stop.
Well, almost. We weren't really prepared for rain as we headed into the Portofino headlands and clung to the sides of slippery cliffs all afternoon. We eventually landed at a small, isolated beach with a monastery and, fortunately, a restaurant where we could get help. Dusk was approaching and we were still far from civilization, but a boat filled with Italian scuba divers was just offshore, and they swung by to pick us up as they headed back into a nearby town.
As the wind blew through our hair and several divers described a 5-meter-tall statue of Jesus they found underwater, splaying their hands in crucifixion, I felt perfectly content with our little adventure. We weren't able to hike another day as I intended. My leg muscles had somehow seized up in terror on the cliff faces and made me a cripple for the remainder of the trip. But we had found the perfect combination of decadence and adventure, and that was just about right.